Hey everybody, this is Andy Sokolovich from UnleashStrengths.com coming to you with another episode of THEME-ADDICTS. As you already know, THEME-ADDICTS is a podcast focused 100% on talking about strengths. What do we mean by strengths? Well, we're referring to the 34 talent themes in the book StrengthsFinder 2.0. And I like to interview people who have an amazing insight into those strengths and want to share their strength story. So today I have a guest with me, Mr. Keith Baldwin. Keith, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then reveal your top 5.
Sure, great. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to the show. My name is Keith Baldwin. I am a strength coach based in Anchorage, Alaska, but I actually have clients scattered throughout the United States. I focus mostly in the insurance market since that's kind of my background, and I help insurance agents create high-performing sales teams. Born and raised in Alaska, so when I'm not talking about strengths or working in my coaching business, I'm trying to water ski on a lake not too far from here, or play with grandkids. So my top 5: harmony, learner, intellection, input, and maximizer.
Very nice. I like that maximizer harmony. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't think you hear that very often.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. And when you were talking about being from Alaska, and you say when I'm not talking about strengths, I thought you were going to say wrestling grizzly bears and catching salmon with your bare hands. I think that's what I pictured. But I'm sure it's a beautiful country. Like I mentioned to you earlier in our broadcast, I always wanted to be stationed there when I was in the Air Force, but never had an opportunity to do so. So that's pretty cool. So this whole StrengthsFinder journey, who introduced you to strengths and why? Maybe you can give us a little insight into how it entered your life.
Well, really, it's learner and input are my top 5, and maybe for those who aren't familiar, I mean, learner has to do with just those who love to learn, and of course, input, we like to collect information. For me, it's collecting information, very specific to coaching clients, and so really, I stumbled across it in my reading because I was very interested in mentoring and coaching, and how do you create positive climates for other people that allow them to thrive. And so it's really good for the organization and really good for the individual, because I came from a background of being very disengaged at work, very unhappy. And when I changed myself, I started thinking, life's too short not to be engaged at work. And so part of my reading, as I was doing some research around this whole idea about creating motivating cultures and how do we engage ourselves, take personal responsibility for engagement, I stumbled across some of the Gallup's work.
Yeah. You bring up a great point. I think far too many people all over the world are spending gobs of their time in a job or a profession that they don't get any kind of satisfaction from. And I was just talking about this the other day, but I think you're noticing a generational difference as we move forward, as new generations, millennials or whatever you want to dub them, come through and out of the school systems. They're more content with focusing on a job that provides them with a tremendous amount of satisfaction as opposed to just earning a paycheck.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool, and I hope the whole concept of strengths-based development kind of spearheaded that movement, because it is certainly a revolution and completely different the way things were 50 years ago. I mean, I know if I would have told my grandfather I was leaving a job with a secure paycheck to pursue something that paid less with less benefits, but I was passionate about it, he would have probably slapped me across the head and called me a fool. But today, people give you the thumbs up and pat you on the back and give you best wishes. So I think it's a tremendous insight. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I read this book once called We Got Fired, and it was an interesting story about people now who are famous, and I can't remember who they are now at this point, but now they're famous coaches of sports teams and CEOs of companies, telling their story about getting fired from a job they didn't particularly like, but how devastating that was, but how that actually opened up the opportunity to find and live their passion.
Yeah, so sometimes what we perceive to be a massive tragedy in our employment history actually turns out to be a blessing in disguise. I know that I personally have a story like that. I mean, I was fired from a job, and it was just I was dissatisfied, and I wasn't a good fit. And at the time, I thought my world was crumbling around me. I had a wife, 2 kids, and my income was gone. But out of those ashes, just kind of risen this desire for me to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And that's how I pursued this whole thing here with coaching and my marketing business. So
right.
So that's true. So since the day that your top 5 or your strengths or your full 34 were revealed to you, what has your journey looked like? How have you kind of taken those top 5 and actually, as Gallup says, to name, claim, and aim, claim, yeah, you know how it goes, and then
Yeah.
actually aim it in a direction where you can take actionable steps to put those into use. How have you been able to do that since revealing your top 5?
Well, my journey is similar to a lot of people in that when I first got my top 5 and I read the book, I thought, wow, this is a really cool concept. I mean, I love this idea. It aligned with my personal philosophy that we all have unique gifts and that we don't believe in our own gifts enough. And then I went on to my next book and next book and next book and really didn't do much with them. It aligned with the direction I was going, but I didn't really get very purposeful about thinking about how do I actually apply strengths in my life or really focus them towards results. So really, it was probably around, probably maybe 2 years ago that I started diving a little bit deeper. And I still didn't quite get it until I went to that incredible training that Gallup does, that you've been through for our certification process. And that whole concept then of thinking about understanding my own strengths and weaknesses, I had some ideas about what my weaknesses were already, but I really didn't own them. And I hadn't really thought about separating the process from the outcome. And so it was kind of frustrating. There were some things like in follow through or organization that weren't natural for me. But when I started really thinking about it in the context of the certification training from Gallup and then all the resources and started using it with my clients, and then I really started that journey, which is still going and probably will go for the next rest of my lifetime of looking at then how do I look at the outcomes I want and then think about how do I use the strengths that I do have. And so for me, like I lead with maximizer a lot, always trying to take things to the next level. The learner and input is very natural for me to continually be studying and understanding more and more about how to apply my strengths. So I wouldn't say that there was like some light switch, flip for a switch moment. It's more like an evolution over time that I keep finding more and more effective ways to get the outcomes that I'm going for.
Right. Managing our own weaknesses is something that we don't normally think about because we focus so much on them, and it's not really a management thing. It reminds me of that, that classic picture of Atlas with the world on his shoulders. I mean, to me, the world resembles your weaknesses for so many people, as opposed to working with your strengths. I like when I hear that people say, okay, well, I recognized what I was good at, my unique talents, and I learned to live a life in line with those, because so many doors open up when you decide that you do have unique talents that you can leverage to make your life easier, reduce the friction, and stop trying to focus so much on your weaknesses. So.
Yeah, and it's for me, the going deeper and deeper into strengths as I do like every day now. It gives me the languaging, but when I look back over my last 25 years, this isn't like new. I mean, I was already doing this. It was just, it was kind of clumsy. I didn't really know how to be purposeful about it, but these things were already manifesting themselves in my life.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. So like one of my early jobs was negotiating claims and for a big insurance company. So I was talking to people that had gone through, tragedies sometimes, lost loved ones in car accidents, very, a lot of litigation type work. And so I was dealing with people in a very contentious environment, and harmony is my number one. And so every day I'm going to work knowing that there's going to be some sort of conflict that day. So early on, that's when I actually had my mid-career meltdown, I like to call it. And became very unhappy, and I thought it was a job, and so I was very unhappy. But when I started switching my focus, this is before I even had the strengths languaging, and I developed a purpose in my life to make a positive difference in the lives of other people. And so I started thinking when somebody would come in and would be angry or yelling, that instead of thinking what's wrong with this jerk or whatever, instead, my whole mindset shift was, how can I make a positive difference in this person's life? And I started looking for areas of agreement. And of course, as you know, but for those that don't know all the themes, harmony, we don't like conflict, but we're really good about looking for areas of agreement. And that really served me well in negotiating. I found that my arguments with clients went way down. I found I built really strong relationships with a lot of the attorneys that I worked with, because I was always looking for areas of agreement, and I ended up, staying another 10 years in that same career that I thought was making me miserable. And I
Mm-hmm.
found out the job wasn't making me miserable. I was doing it myself. And when I really started, even though I didn't have the strengths languaging, when I started to live through harmony and look at how to build that with the people that started angry, that was actually a cool challenge, I'd go, oh cool, here's somebody who's mad. How can I win them over?
That's interesting. You think that's cool? I mean, that's the point. In when we talk about strengths-based development, we a lot of times when we talk about especially job satisfaction, so many people misinterpret discussion of strengths is, and if you're not happy in your job and it's not in line with your strengths, then quit. That's not at all what we're telling folks out there. We're basically saying if you don't love what you do, you're not getting that satisfaction, maybe there's a way that you're just like you can apply your natural talent, your theme, harmony, and the job started to give you satisfaction, and you found it to be cool, and you hung out for another 10 years.
Yeah.
But you were going against that grain. There was so much friction because you weren't uniquely aware of your strengths at the time, and then you realized that it was just easier when you actually applied what your talent was, and that talent
Yeah.
theme being harmony. And I think harmony is just one of those themes that I absolutely love. I don't have it myself. At least it's a lesser talent for me. But it's one that I just think is so cool because I love when I see people with high harmony come in and be able to diffuse a situation and bring everybody back to a state of calmness and actually be able to move forward and be effective. And I don't have that. I want to jump in the fight
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to have harmony. So yeah, that's really neat. Well, you expressed earlier in the interview that did you have an aha moment? That typical aha moment where somebody receives their report and they look at it and they say, oh, that's what I've been looking for. For me, it was woo, because I always knew I had it, but I never knew what to call it. So my big aha moment was just having the ability to actually explain how I operate. Did you have anything like that?
I did, but it wasn't on the top five. Because the top five, when I read those, it was kind of like, well, yeah, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for me, the aha was when I looked at the bottom of the list, and for me, lesser strengths are things like activator, discipline, focus, are three big ones. And I used to always wish that, oh, how come I can't just like focus on one thing and just really take a thought and put into action, like just launch. And why do I spend all this time like studying things and reading? Like, why don't I just do stuff? And so for me, the aha moment was going, oh, now it makes sense that that's natural for me. So now that I understand this is natural for me, how do I build a team around me that has the activator, that has kind of like a quick launch piece, and then how do I use what I do have to get the outcomes that I want? And so I now I use like those themes, my roughly top 10 or so. There are some themes there I leverage to be in action and to get the outcomes that I need for the business and myself personally. So the aha for me was just accepting that there are some things I probably won't change, that are down in the bottom of my list.
I think the more and more people I interview, the more I get that exact response, is that it's not in my top five. I had the aha moment when I reviewed my full 34. And I think that's something, I mean, that's to me a huge insight into strengths-based development. And this podcast is created for people that have their top five report and really are just looking at the surface of strengths-based development and just trying to kind of propel themselves forward. But that bottom five is just as insightful as that top five, because you and I are very, very similar. I have everything that you mentioned is a lesser talent for me. My ability to focus, to actually get things from start to finish, is very, very difficult. And for so long, it was kind of, I was labeled as somebody who would start something but probably is not going to finish it. And that hurt me personally. I thought that was kind of insulting, but now I realize it's true. In order for me to get that stuff done, I'm going to have to harness the power of others' talents and collaborate to form a perfect union that we can get from start to finish together as a team. So,
yeah, like I love, Gallup often talks about that highly successful individuals are not well-rounded, but highly successful teams must be. And and so I just love that whole concept of how can we build a team around us. And I'm like what you call a solopreneur. So I have my own coaching business. My wife's also part of it, but we've built it, brought in some virtual assistants, independent contractors, other people around us to help fill in the areas that we're not so strong in, so we can spend the time focused on those things that we are strong in.
And that's just pure genius. I mean, not to get all geeky, but technology and the ability to outsource things now is so simple that if you can get on these websites like Elance and Odesk and find virtual assistants and people who are willing for money to supplement your weakness. And I think that's so cool. And people look at it and say, well, I wouldn't pay somebody to do this. Well, yes, you would. Once you realize that it's something that comes very difficult to you, you will be willing to pay somebody to fulfill that need. It's just like paying a mechanic to change the carburetor out in your vehicle. You can't do it yourself, so you pay somebody who can. And I think that's very intelligent of you to actually acknowledge that, number one, but then take strides to make sure that you're hiring people who can fulfill that weakness and allow you to propel forward.
And one of the things I talk to a lot of my coaching clients about is to try to focus most of their time on what I call high leverage activities. So that's things they're great at, they love doing, and that have the biggest ripple effect on their business, the biggest impact. And I don't know about you, but I used to find that I'd spend a lot of time doing things because I just thought I should do everything. That when I looked at them, I wasn't good at them. I didn't like it, and really they weren't like high impact activities. They were things that had to be done, like bookkeeping and things like that, but much better off paying somebody else. I don't know what your experience has been, but
no, ditto. The exact same, a mirror image. I mean, I love doing podcasts. I love recording these videos. I love writing blog posts. I love, creating content to share with people. I love cruising on social media and working on websites. I hate the actual logistics of owning a business. And my accountant would have to chase me down. I mean, the first time I ever filed a return, I took her a big Walmart bag full of receipts. And she said, you have to itemize these. And I said, well, isn't that what you do? She said, no, you have to maintain some kind of order here. And I said, no, I am bad at that stuff. I said, so, and this is before I knew about strengths. So she was probably looking at me just scratching her head. But now I can say, and I acknowledge that now, and I make sure that I enlist actually the help of my wife, who's very good at that. And then when we go to our accountant tax season time, she's always very thankful that I married a woman who had the top 5 that she does. So yeah, that's so here's an interesting question, and I always ask people this, and you being a coach, you'll probably have some solid insights, but what resistance do you face when you approach somebody and you tell them, hey, there's this assessment out there, StrengthsFinder. I'd like for you to take it. I think it's going to create some ease of, I guess, not only your time, but it should open up things and allow you to leverage your time more effectively. Why don't you take it? What kind of resistance do you get, and then how do you maybe get around that resistance?
Well, to start with, I don't get a lot of resistance, so
Good.
Probably less than 5%. And part of that, I think, is kind of building that know, like, and trust factor with clients before I even introduce the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they start seeing and understand the results that other clients I'm working with are getting, that they're at least curious about it and fairly open. Two, Gallup is very well recognized, so even if people haven't heard the StrengthsFinder, they know about Gallup, and so I don't get a lot of resistance. But to answer your question, when I do get pushback, my answer always is great. Tell me what you do believe, or great. Well, let's kind of table this for right now. Tell me about like, what do you love about what you do? Tell me about really successful days that you've had. Tell me about days that haven't gone so well. And so I have them talk and process a little bit about when they've been on fire and felt like a rock star at work, or whatever the situations we're coaching around, and days when they've just drug. And then I ask them some more questions to start to identify, what are some of the patterns, and then ask them, is there, like, how do you think, natural talent plays into this? Are there some ways that you naturally behave in a given circumstance that impact how you get results? And so for me, it's not trying to ever force anything on somebody, like, hey, you got to believe this because the research says blah, 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 blah. I love the research, but I know most people don't really care. What they want to know is, can this give me results? And so when I help people see how they're already getting results from the strength they have, and that if we use the Strength Finder, we can just sharpen what they're already doing, then that concern kind of seems to dissipate.
Yeah, I like what you said there. I like how you stated that, they already are aware of their talents. So we're going to use this tool, StrengthsFinder, to sharpen that edge.
Yeah.
And I think that phrase alone adds some more credibility to the fact that it's like they're taking it just to make themselves better, as opposed to you trying to sell them on the fact that this is going to work for you.
Yeah.
And we've all heard. I mean, at least I have the "oh no, not another assessment" phrase.
Right.
Or excuses. I'm not going to take assessment. I've already taken personality tests, and there's an interesting. I just ripped a video off of YouTube. It was Jim Clifton speaking at Georgetown, I think, and he says, people are going to come into your business. So this is what a lot of people don't understand. People are going to come into your business. They're going to give you assessments, and they're going to say, okay, now based on this assessment, we're going to start working on your weaknesses. But as soon as you start to do that, he says it just retards any kind of forward momentum. It actually just stops you dead in your tracks, because focusing on your weaknesses is, you're going to sink every single time because it's too difficult. It's just too hard.
Exhausting.
It's got to be. I mean, I can't. Well, I do know, because I focused on my weaknesses for so long that it did become exhausting, physically and mentally debilitating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that, sharpen your own edge, because people are naturally going to be more accepting of something that they believe is naturally just going to make them better, and that's a good way to phrase it too, because then it's kind of like their own idea, they already acknowledge their talents. It's their idea now, just to figure out a way to sharpen that edge. So
yeah, and I find most people love the idea when I talk about the high leverage use of time concept. They love the idea of doing things they're great at, that they love doing, that will have the biggest impact. And so in that context, it's kind of like almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, who doesn't love something? Who doesn't love doing something that they already enjoy?
Yeah,
especially if it turns out to be profitable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's everybody's goal. I mean, there's that old age-old quote out there that says, "You'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do," and I think it's pretty darn accurate.
All right.
So what advice would you share? Let's put you in this scenario that you're sitting behind somebody, maybe not necessarily a client, maybe just a friend or an acquaintance, or even a stranger, and they hit that Control P, they print out their top 5, they're looking at that report, and now they're sitting there kind of scratching their head, because what advice would you give them as step 1 in order for them to initiate some kind of action steps to be able to utilize that information they just received?
Yeah. So a couple things. Oftentimes I kind of lead in telling people that the natural inclination for many people is to go talent shopping, I call it, to go right to the bottom of the list and go, oh, how come I don't have more of these? Mm-hmm. And so I always tell everybody that you're going to want to do that, and fine, go ahead and do it, but just realize that's not the point of this. We're going to talk about, we can talk about that later. Just know that the real power is going to come at the top of the report. So what I recommend people do is to just spend some time going through, pretty simple really, just kind of reading and processing their report, and highlighting, making a few notes, and thinking about not so much the words on the paper as how do they see this showing up in their life. And to make a few notes. And I also tell them that if there are some phrases or sentences there that you go, that's not me, just line them out. It's not as much about what's on the report as how does this stuff show up for you in your real life. And so that's kind of the starting place that I go to, is just avoid talent shopping, and then read through especially that top 5, and just look for what makes sense to you.
Yeah, what is that in the background there?
Oh yeah, I don't know. They're doing some sort of work outside. Hopefully they'll keep on moving. So.
You crazy Alaskans always have something going on up there. That's probably some power saw. Who knows?
I know.
That was a very good point. I like how you said talent shopping. I think that's a good way to describe it, because you're right. Not everybody gets their top 5 and goes, yep, I love this. Some people want, or they think that they're going to take the assessment, and they're thinking in their mind, they're like, oh, I'm going to have this, I'm going to have deliberative, oh, I'm going to have woo, and then that comes out, and they don't. At least it's not in their top 5, and they start to feel bad. Like, I really thought I would have had that. And it's just one of those things where, you gotta look at the report, take it for what it's presenting to you. And I love how you say, if this certain sentence in the report doesn't speak to you, just line through it. Don't focus on that. Focus on what it is saying that you can relate with. So yeah, that's a solid response. I like that a lot. So we always ask this question, and sometimes it yields different responses. Okay. But I always say, again, this show is, now you have a very broad knowledge of the themes being a coach. I mean, you know your full 34, you know the definitions and insights of all the 34 talent themes, but this is about kind of going out there and talking to the people that just received their top 5. Okay. So out of your top 5, Keith, what would you say is your favorite and why? Or maybe you don't have a favorite, or maybe it's a culmination of 2 separate themes.
Well, by far it's maximizer. Good. I mean, that's what led me to become a coach. It's what led me, even before I was a coach and I was living in the corporate world. I can see. This sounds weird, but I can almost see gifts within people. You talk to them for a little bit, and I see these gifts, and I sense that people don't believe in their own gifts. And so it's kind of like my mission to help people really understand their gifts, believe in their gifts, and then deploy their gifts. And so, obviously, that's why I'm a coach, and it's why I'm fascinated with this whole subject about how, how do we help people really create their best life, that really feels like they're fulfilled. And so definitely I lead with maximizer, and I lost the rest of the question.
No, that's a good response. I just wanted you, but maximizer is a great theme, and I love that you can acknowledge that you have the ability to see greatness in other people. You can see those talents, and it doesn't sound crazy. I mean, a lot of people just aren't introspective, or they're so talented at something, yet they've been told for so long that it really isn't a talent. Yeah. Or it's just a distraction, or it's not something that's going to monetize. I mean, how many people have heard that? Like, well, yeah, you're talented at this and you're really good at it, but what kind of money are you going to make?
Yeah, I have clients often say a variety of things that all are on the same theme. Well, that can't be a strength. That's just so easy for me. It's not a strength. And so, like, yeah, that's the idea.
Right. Yeah, that's the whole point. I mean, it's not about, I mean, we can work on our weaknesses or our lesser strengths, and we can try to make them better, but how long is that going to take to go from okay to good? And you'll never ever touch great. Right. But you were born with unique set of talents where you're already sitting on great, or you're already sitting on the top end of good. So this whole concept of strengths-based development is taking that where you sit in that top tier of a certain talent or ability and just maximizing that. And that's where your maximizer comes in. That's why I think you, sir, are in the perfect job. So I applaud your efforts to seek out coaching, and especially StrengthsFinder, because listening to you speak, there's no doubt in my mind that you were helping everybody that you come in contact with.
Yeah, the first time I had a paid client, I was giddy. I went up and told my wife afterwards. I said, I can't believe I get paid to do this. I mean, this person is so gifted, and they don't even see it. And this is like so awesome. I mean, I can't believe I'm actually doing this.
I know. That is a very unique feeling, and I wish many people in this world have that ability to feel that. And it's just one of those things that's just so rewarding. Not monetarily. Just, I mean, in your heart, you just feel so warm, and having the ability to show somebody something that was right in front of their face the whole time, it's like, finding a long-lost wedding ring or something like that. It's that warming feeling that you get when you can just help other people, and that's why I love coaching. It's whether it's coaching in the form of StrengthsFinder, or it's coaching in the form of marketing, or just helping people like you do realize that they do have these strengths and these talents, and they can use them to make their lives happier and more fulfilling.
Yeah.
So looking back, and this is a very introspective question, looking back, how do you think your life would be different today if early on in the interview discussed how you always knew you had these strengths. But let's take the report itself and the assessment. If that assessment never came into your life and you never had the the verbiage or the language to use, how do you think your life would be different today?
Well, I was on this journey for, gosh, I've probably been on this journey about 20 years, and so for me, bringing the strengths in has accelerated this journey in personal understanding and how I can really make a positive impact in other people. And so, probably because I lead with input and learner, um, you know, and I've read so much around the areas of motivation, and how do we create that internal drive that, I'd still be on the same path, whether I knew about Maximizer or not, I'd still be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'd still be in the same path of believing in other people, but now I just have a way to really articulate and paint a picture for people uh, that makes it a little more concrete. And so I just think I'm a much more effective coach, and also more effective personally and professionally, just because now I have a better understanding of my own strengths. So if I didn't have this, I'd probably have more areas of frustration, I guess, than what I do now. I'm much more accepting of myself as a person, because oftentimes, even though I see the gifts in other people, that I always want more out of myself, which is probably the maximizer, the negative part of the maximizer probably coming out. And so I think having this understanding reduces my own frustration level and increases my effectiveness.
Hmm. Yeah, I like how you said accelerate. I don't know if you ever seen the movie. I think it's called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I mean, it's a movie. It was a very good book as well. But in the movie, Walter's always thinking of different scenarios in his life, and they would be kind of accelerated, high octane, high energy, high adventure. And when you said that, I pictured in my mind's eye, I mean, like Keith going along in an Amish horse and buggy on your journey, and then finding StrengthsFinder, and then hopping into a single-seated Indy car. It's just I like that term, accelerate. That's kind of how my brain works, but I think that's an awesome way to phrase it.
Yeah.
So towards the end of the show, I always like to give our guests an opportunity to go ahead and reveal some of their contact information, or talk about a website or some business stuff that they want to reveal to the audience. And just if generally people listen to this podcast and they have more questions for Mr. Keith Baldwin, how would they get in contact with you?
Oh, well, thank you. So the easiest way to find me is just keithbaldwin.com, BALDWIN, like the actors, .com, and there is there are some resources on there, various blogs and contact information, a bit about the type of work that I do, or they can reach me by email at keith@keithbaldwin.com.
Oh, very cool, very cool. So are you an unclaimed Baldwin brother?
Yeah, I just didn't like the Hollywood life.
Yeah, he didn't like the Hollywood lifestyle.
Yeah,
Oh,
no relationship that I know of.
yeah, I don't know if I claim that whole Baldwin thing either. Well, sir, thank you very much for joining us. This is we're just at the very beginning of this whole podcast series, Theme-ADDICTS, and I thank each and every guest for kind of rolling the dice and taking the opportunity to allow me to interview them and to hopefully spread the message of strengths-based development and the beauty that is focusing on your strengths. So thank you again, sir, for being our guest.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing getting the word out about strengths.
Thank you. And all right, everybody, this is Andy from UnleashStrengths.com. Again, this is another episode of Theme-ADDICTS. If you want to follow us on Facebook, Facebook.com/UnleashStrengths. Hit us up on Twitter at UnleashCSF. Again, that's at UnleashCSF. And you can always cruise around our blog posts and our video selection at YouTube. Just go ahead and search Unleash Strengths. That's our channel name. You can find us anywhere on the web. And be sure to take part if you're new to strengths and you want to look for some serious content, help, forums. There's two StrengthsFinder Facebook groups. One is called Gallup Call to Coach. That's a group that has a bunch of strengths coaches just cruising around the social media for us, answering a bunch of questions for you and yours. And then there's another one called the Gallup StrengthsFinder, and that's just that's another Facebook group designed just to promote StrengthsFinder. So two solid resources. That's how I find pretty much everybody that I interview, and that's how I get the word out about this podcast. So if you have anybody that you think would be a great interviewee for this podcast to be a guest on our show, go ahead and email me their contact information, Andy, A-N-D-Y, at UnleashStrengths.com. All right, that's it for this episode of Theme-Addicts. See you guys later.